Peter Parker and Spider-Man have been a part of our culture now for many, many, many years, and many generations of people have their own love of the character in the comics.
You know, it's a really daunting thing to be part of something that you know has a built-in fan base and people that are very protective of the material, but then it becomes exciting.
People say, oh, why would you do it again? But the comic book reinvented itself many, many times. You know, there are many iterations of Peter Parker over the 50 years, always with the same root characteristics.
And we really got very interested in the other stories about Spider-Man that never been delved into.
I had trepidation about the idea of me stepping into the responsibility of it, and I didn't want to ruin the fantasy of it, and I didn't want to take him down from the pedestal that I'd put him on. You know, I'm talking about the fictional character of Spider-Man.
Marc really wanted to go sort of old school and see real people doing stuff.
I do feel an obligation to the audience to make something worthy of the Spider-Man mantle. And it's hard, but such is life.
After Spider-Man 3, we talked to Sony about doing a Spider-Man 4 with Tobey. And we went pretty far down the road. There were a couple different versions of the story. And I think, you know, that ultimately there was a feeling that it was time to reinvent, you know, to start fresh.
We didn't have a natural extension, because in essence you had an origin in movie 1. In movie 2 you had Spidey No More. And in movie 3 you had the dark versus light. And I think we covered the Mary Jane relationship to the extent that we literally needed to find someone else for Mary Jane. Moving into Progress created some challenges that I think Sam and Tobey and us were starting to question the validity of the next one.
It was a huge challenge. You know, I think I was president of the studio at the time, so I was wearing a slightly different hat, although the challenge was no less daunting. We all knew that we wanted to keep telling Spider-Man stories, but the question was how to do it, and we felt that there was already a history that preceded us of sort of reimagining the character. There are the essential elements to it, and you know, the sort of the all critical message of, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, and what happens between Peter and his Uncle Ben and all of that, and the spider bite. But there are so many different ways to interpret those events.
There's a whole generation who wasn't born in 2002 when Spider-Man 1 came out. So, you know, there's a whole audience for whom this is a new experience. So that was kind of the rationale.
I was originally hired to write Spider-Man 4 and was really sort of excited to come in and do that because I wanted to, no one had sort of finished out a superhero franchise before, sort of on purpose. And so that was like a really attractive thing. So Laura Ziskin and Avi Arad sort of brought me in to do that. And then through various kind of, you know, machinations, the movie didn't end up getting made. And so Amy Pascal called me and she said, listen, we're not gonna end up making Spider-Man 4, but would you be interested in helping us to start again with the franchise?
Say cheers! Cheers!
Because of where the stories went in the first 3 movies, Peter Parker grew up fast. And I think we always felt that if we could go back, which we have this unique opportunity, you know, to start again, that we really wanted to spend more time with Peter Parker in high school. That was a very appealing part of the comic book. So that was a kind of defining concept for us. And then also, to change tone a bit.
The thing that clicked for me was the idea of doing it in a completely contemporary way, which sounds sort of obvious, but when you give Peter Parker, a cell phone, when you put him in what high school sort of really like today, was sort of a really interesting idea. And also this idea of making it a movie about what it's like to be an orphan.
Where are you going?
Something your mom and I have to do.
So much of what defines that character is his origin. Peter Parker's, or Spider-Man's origin story is so powerful. And so we wanted to go back, but do it in a way that was also clean and respectful of the old. So with that said, we did what we do at studios, and we thought about who our favorite filmmakers were.
We have to be able to see him transform from a human into this thing and back again without president. Is Patrick here? No, Patrick. Can I ask his phone? So Patrick, if anybody sees Patrick, tell him Fran called. He sounds like his mom.
Marc Webb, he'd never done anything like this. That's, a benefit, and also like, oh my God, for him and for us, But we loved 500 Days of Summer. We felt that he had a unique style. And so I think it was finding a director who could speak about the character in a fresh way, but in a way that was still true to the ethos, to the gestalt of the comic books.
I never thought I would do a comic book movie. It just wasn't part of my DNA, but I think when I was older, it actually became more appealing to me, because I think that you start to understand there's some really universal, deep themes that are at work in a lot of these things, and I think I started to appreciate the sophistication of the Spider-Man story in particular.
The movie he did before was about a love story and came from an emotional place and was not a big special effects movie. I think was kind of a testament to how the studio wanted to make this and sort of the direction they wanted this movie to go.
When his name came up, it happened to be just after I watched 500 Days of Summer. And it was so unusual. And the relationship was so fresh. It wasn't like the normal love story. Actually, it was anything but a normal love story.
I knew I wanted to make a movie sooner rather than later, because I just didn't want to sit around and contemplate. I wanted to make something, and I had read a few scripts, and I met with the people at Sony, and they actually brought it up to me, and I thought it was the most absurd idea. I did 500 Days of Summer. It's about, a guy who's falling in love. It has what possibly could you conceive of that would make this a good idea, but they were fairly persistent.
The notion of going from 500 Days to Summer to this global endeavor, frankly, that is, building a Spider-Man franchise, was pretty overwhelming.
They're like, well, what do you want to do? What would make this viable to you? And I said, well, if we start over, if we invite new information about the story that people haven't seen before, and we give this kid an edge that I think that any kid who loses his parents at that young of an age, there's an enormous emotional consequence that will color his life from that point forth.
Peter, come back here, please.
And they were like, okay, sounds good. And I wrote some other, like a sort of specific note to them saying, this is the vibe that I'm going for.
He had a genuine love for this character and very quickly got over, I think being daunted by it, and saw that there was this incredible support, and that with Avi and Laura, who had been there, and a studio that was completely backing him, it was a great challenge, and he loves a challenge.
All right, so when we go this time, everybody on action, everybody has to have something in their head that they're ready to say, and then we just go, all right?
Marc came in and read it and sort of immersed himself in it, and really quickly, I think, responded to who Peter Parker could be, and what a misfit and what an outcast he could kind of be.
I view Peter Parker as not as necessarily as a nerd per se, because I think nerd in the current world means a different thing, but the perennial type is the outsider. He's the guy who isn't accepted by the crowd, maybe doesn't want to be entirely, does his own thing, and that I think is what made it appealing to me.
In the beginning of our movie, Peter discovers his father's case, and upon opening it, you see a picture, he discovers Oscorp. All of a sudden, his world turned because he found the key to find out more about his parents. And now it's Peter's movie.
The search for his father is what leads him to get bit by the spider. Basically, I didn't want the spider bite to be an arbitrary thing. I wanted it to be a representation of his desire to fill a void. And I think that's one of the themes of the movie that really had always interested me, is that we all have a missing piece somewhere. We all have something that's gone, a hole, and how we choose to fill that void is how we define ourselves. And I think that was my access point for the character when we were developing the project.
I'm Richard Parker's son.
Peter.
The inverse of that, of course, is Dr. Connors, who also has a missing piece, manifested in a much more literal way.
Yes, in case you're wondering, I'm a southpaw.
And he's trying to fill that, but it gets the best of him.
My favorite villain of all time is Connors. Because again, it's about loss. Peter suffered the loss, and Connors suffered the loss.
Visually, the notion of this kind of Jekyll and Hyde character who was a scientist and an enormous crazed lizard was just compelling.
I wanted to do a villain that was, first of all, something that sort of fans knew, but also to tell a very, very simple story. And the story of the lizard is kind of like the most sort of basic emotional story there is. It's a guy who is missing something. And the story we're telling with Peter right now is about a guy who's missing something. So that always seemed to be a really close fit.
Great drama comes from competing ideas of what's good and what's right. And I think the lizard believes what he's doing is correct. He thinks he's being compassionate. He thinks that the world around him will be better if they're like him, stronger, less susceptible to disease and weakness. And he doesn't understand that people should have a choice.
This is my gift to you.
As a filmmaker, he's very much about character all the way through. His feeling on it is, if we get the heart of the story right, the rest of it will fall into place.
And next stop, Coney Island. All right, good, and cut. Cut. That was really good.
What's your name? Peter. Parker. Peter Parker. Okay, good.
The shoes that had to be filled were enormous. And we knew, and this is what I think is so special about Spider-Man, it is all about this boy, this boy man. And these movies hang on that character, and the casting of that character is everything.
Are you having trouble finding yourself?
No.
We found our Peter Parker very much like we did with the first movie, is we just looked at every possible young man who was in the right age category, and we tested some extraordinary actors.
Look over to the key light, please. There you go.
I was trying to find somebody in Peter Parker that had an adolescent quality, that was funny, but also not quite comfortable in his skin.
Marc had a real vision for who this was going to be, and he didn't know who it was. It's like he was waiting for somebody to walk into it. At the same time, at the studio, we'd made Social Network, and Garfield was extraordinary in the movie. It became very clear, wow, here's somebody who should certainly go in that list of people.
I didn't think I had a hope in hell of being cast, like genuinely. It didn't even cross my mind. It's one of those very bizarre things. So when I first heard about it, I kind of thought, well, I hope they do a good job. That was my only real thought, because I love the first three films.
I remember talking to Andrew the first time, and we had a phone conversation, and he was like, well, so why should I do this? He took on this very skeptical attitude towards trying to reinvent this mythology, and he was a big Spider-Man fan growing up. And I was intrigued by that, because It showed a level of control and thoughtfulness that you don't see very often.
Eventually, I kind of got to a very quiet place within myself, and this little voice came up, and it was me as a 3-year-old, and he was like, yo, 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 what the hell are you thinking? Of course you're gonna go and do this, because this has always been what you've wanted to do your whole life since you were born. You were meant to be in contention for this role. My inner 3-year-old is incredibly aggressive, and he wouldn't take no for an answer, ultimately.
We screen tested a few actors, all of whom were exceptional, very gifted, very talented actors, and there was something about him. I thought he embodied the spirit of an adolescent and the sort of awkward fumbling and the nervous quality that I was looking for, unlike anybody else I had seen.
I had to fight a lizard today, but it was not an ordinary lizard.
He came and he did the work, and you just went, eureka. He's this character. Very different from Toby, which was a positive for us because we really want to make something different.
Cut. Good. Cut. Good.
That changing like the snake I might be free to cast off flesh wherein I dwell confined.
If Peter Parker is everything in these movies, then there's the villain. Because the villains in these movies are not simply one-dimensional, but they're tragic and brilliant and all that, it has to be somebody with an incredible range.
The trick with finding Kirk Connors was there's a few things. First, had to feel like a father figure in some way to Peter. He has to have the sophistication of a brilliant scientist, but he also has to have the maniacal side that is unleashed as the lizard.
And action.
We auditioned a lot of people for Kirk Connors, and then Rhys came in, and after his audition, he left the room. We were like, that's our guy.
I met with Marc and the producers several months ago. I flew in to read, and I kind of got it then, who this guy was. He's not a villain as such. He's just a guy who wants his arm back. But Connors does feel kind of cheated by God. And he's looking for answers in science.
Rhys as the lizard, he came in for audition, and at least for me, for the first time in my life, I got off the couch, I got on my knees, I was walking closer and closer to get inside what he was doing. And he actually went through a trance. Took him like 10 minutes to stop shaking and so on. And you'll see this scene in a movie.
I've been a fan of his ever since I was studying acting and wanting to be an actor, and he's been someone that I've looked up to for a long time. So to have him as a mentor in that respect, in this role of Dr. Connors, is lucky, It's very, very lucky, because I respect him so much and I admire him so much and I look up to him so much, and I want his approval as a person. And if that can translate on screen into me wanting his approval as a character, then that's fantastic.
You knew how I felt. Incomplete.
He had to train to live with one arm. And how does that affect your posture, your behavior? How does that affect your psychology? Do you feel inferior because of it? Do you feel like you have to compensate for it? And he took on a sort of regal attitude and pretended not to be ashamed of that and took it as his inspiration.
Ready to play God?
I have real, genuine affection for this guy. I'm not portraying a villain in any sense. It's a man with real, genuine needs and anxieties. There's a real pain and pathos to Connors.
Are you all right?
Never been better, Peter, never been better. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I've a new project I'm working on and I need to be alone. Don't worry, Mr. Parker. I'll be back.
Sure. Okay. Is he here? Or?
Hey, director man. Just moving the chairs.
Moving them chairs.
Like director does.
Yeah,
Probably one of the greatest things happened to us in this movie is to get Emma Stone. Her banter with Andrew is unbelievable.
Hey, Rodrigo. Hola.
The essence of why we chose her was this incredibly powerful, undeniable chemistry that she had with Andrew. And she disarmed him.
She came in and she was like a shot of espresso.
Well, they won't notice now that
She's like being bathed in sunlight.
Me?
She's incredibly energetic and enthusiastic, and she had this sense of play and fun, which was incredibly exciting.
You boys are gross.
When we tested them, there was fireworks. She could take on Andrew's improvisation and witticisms and one-up them. I mean, it was amazing to see them go back and forth, and it was really, really fun to watch them. And again, it became an obvious combination because that's what people are there for.
Between Andrew and I think it's been, you know, Marc's biggest goal has been working out that relationship and making sure it feels authentic, and he kind of brings it all back down to earth, even though we're operating in a superhero universe. So I think it's really important to Marc, and it's certainly really important to Andrew and I, that this relationship would exist in a world of no superheroes.
I don't know, we could, or we could do something else, or we could, or we could.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, either one.
All right, yeah, all right, good.
Okay.
Gwen Stacy in the comics was Peter's first love, and she's somebody who is as smart as Peter is.
He's second in his class.
Oh. Second? Yeah. You sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
We got a lot of crap because Emma has been known to have red hair and everybody thought that should be Mary Jane, but when people saw her and see her as a blonde, she's magnificent. I can't think of Gwen Stacy in any other way.
Action!
Hey!
Dad, this is Spider-Man.
Get in the car, let's go. Come on.
No,
Get
it
in
can
the
stop
car.
the lizard.
Get in the
it
car.
Can stop.
Let's go.
You don't understand,
Yes,
Dad.
I do. Your boyfriend is a man of many masks. All right? Let me have this. Me.
Well, now we're never gonna stop the lizard.
I think we were all Dennis Leary fans. You know, I've known him for years, and once we had Emma, he felt like just a really great choice.
He's the guy who we cast most against type. Like Dennis, you think of Dennis Leary from Rescue Me or from any of his other movies, and he's this sort of offhanded, very callous, irreverent guy. But Captain Stacy believes in law and order. And, you know, he's had a history of portraying a firefighter, and I think he has a real understanding and respect for men in uniform, and he really brought that to the table.
I'm issuing an arrest warrant for the masked vigilante known as Spider-Man. I got assumed when Marc was talking to me, I was thinking, well, you know, he's seen Rescue Me. He knows I'm a multiple Emmy nominee. I'm a great dramatic actor. Blah, blubbity, blah. And my friend says, oh my God, I knew he was going to cast you. And I said, yeah, because, you know, I'm such a great actor. And he goes, well, maybe, but, you know, you look just like Captain Stacy. And I go, what? And he sends me the picture, and I literally, it's one frame from a comic book, and it's Captain Stacy, and I went, oh my God, he looks just like me. So it actually had nothing to do with my acting ability. It was all about the fact that, you know, I look like the guy. And Defoe had already been in a couple of the movies, so they couldn't cast him. They had to stick with me.
I love Dennis, and I wish that I got to work with him more. I feel like I just wish there was more and more of that relationship. I have cramps.
Oh.
Like I feel kind of pukey and just sort of, I don't know, like emotional, like I keep crying.
Good.
It's brutal. To have a father that's the police chief, and how complicated that is to be with the biggest villain in New York City and have your father be so against him is just, you know, that's a huge conflict.
He is transformed into a lizard.
You know that Dr. Connors recently completed a college recommendation for Gwen? It was beautiful. When I read it, I cried, okay?
We have an antagonistic relationship, and it's been fun, actually. Like, such great fun to attempt to keep up with him and his wit and his intelligence and his quickness, and to fight for the hand of his daughter is a terrifying prospect, but one that Peter has to get through and has to win.
Hey, only Marc.
Where do you go? Who does this to you?
Please go to sleep, Aunt May.
Please tell me.
Aunt May, please, please, please go to sleep.
I can't sleep. Don't you understand? I can't sleep.
I wanted to make the relationship between Aunt May and Peter have some tension and have the audience understand both their points of view, but when you put the camera on Sally Field, you're putting the camera on the American mom, and it's a pretty intense thing. It's a pretty wonderful, sweet, powerful thing.
It's certainly a much more complex Spider-Man family than ever before. And there's the whole Spider-Man aspect of the special effects and the stunts. And then there's the family part of it. And the family part of it is really about a young coming-of-age kid trying to find himself and driving his aunt and uncle crazy. And that's kind of a universal theme in life. You know, you drive your parents crazy because you don't know who you are and that you feel like they're in your way. And that's what we were doing on our side, the family side.
We've had wonderful talks, and she's given me wonderful advice and wonderful support, and she's dedicated and committed, and she cares so deeply about what she does, and she has so much to give, and she gives it freely.
Once we cast Sally, then we started to think about Martin Sheen, who brings a lot of the same values. And together, they created what Aunt May and Uncle Ben really would be today.
Remember when we were stupid and dangerous?
No.
Trust me, we were.
Martin Sheen is an iconic presence, much like Sally Field. And he's everybody's Uncle Ben, and everybody sort of knows and feels that affection towards him, which was a really important thing.
Action.
So that when you lose him, you sense that loss.
And bang!
You feel torn. And that is really the epitome of Uncle Ben. And I think there's very few people who can embody it as well as he can.
Did you humiliate that boy?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did?
I did. He deserved it.
Is he the boy that hit you?
Yeah.
Oh, so this is about getting even then. Am I right or wrong? I liked the fact that he had a kind of a moral influence or ethical influence on the lad, you know, and that in a way, Uncle Ben is his hero and is the motivating factor for a lot of the good things he does.
It's been a surreal experience to work with him, and to have this kind of relationship that Peter has with him is a wonderful, enriching thing.
Well, you know, I've never been in this big a production. Not many people have, you know. This is enormous. What a beautiful bunch. Look at this. I just don't know how to respond to such a thing, but I'm happy as Larry to be a part of it, and I'll go wherever it takes us. And the only regret I have is that I obviously can't be in the next one, unless it's a prequel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Sheen, Johnny.
It was one of the most, if not the most exciting parts for me, was getting to interact and collaborate with these iconic actors, with these incredibly powerful creative artists, and just sitting by them and listening to them talk and listening to their stories and watching their process. It was incredibly instructive and really inspiring.
Okay, roll cameras. Rolling. Hey, Mark.
So the first day of shooting, the longest car ride of my life, going from Silver Lake to Hollywood to the Music Box Theater.
The first day's location was shot at the Music Box Theater in Hollywood, where Peter Parker, after he's running on the roof, falls through the roof and comes down onto a wrestling stage. It's a great old theater in Hollywood. They'd recently undergone a renovation, and it just worked perfectly for our activities. We were able to fit in between a couple of shows that they had, and the work on the first day was seamless.
Part of Spider-Man's history is the wrestling thing, which we dealt with in a different way in this film.
A mask protects its identity, where versatile.
But we still referred to that sort of lucha libre fighting style, which I think was a nod to the older comics.
One of the things that was really important for Marc is to make things as realistic as possible. And so what we've tried to do from the very beginning is do as much as we can in camera as you possibly can before you go into the visual effects part of it, that the movements would be more natural and things like that. And I think we were smart in the sense that we got Andy Armstrong and Vic Armstrong involved in the project really early.
Vic Armstrong is one of the old school legends of the stunt business. He doubled Indiana Jones, Superman. I mean, he's done it all.
It's a great one where you see the body language change
on the transfer.
Oh, yeah.
That would be really good.
Vic was there to sort of shepherd a lot of the action unit stuff.
I'd done my homework and watched the other movies, and then I met Marc Webb, and I could see he was on the same route as myself and my brother Andy, who I worked very closely with, in as much as we wanted to do it as realistically as we could.
We wanted to go very retro with it, where there would be much more physical action, much more real human interaction, which was something that Vic and I really wanted to do as well.
All right, please set up.
Vic was approached first, and then explained to Marc that if Vic was away doing the second unit, then I would be the person that would be working with Marc more closely.
Andy Armstrong really became my right hand in developing this.
He does a trunk roof fire escape, kick the guy off, and then he goes from one fire escape up to another fire escape on the other side.
All right. One of the things we talked about very early on was Buster Keaton. And we were both huge Buster Keaton fans. And part of that was he did everything for real. And you did things in longer takes. And that was something that we always aimed for in the stunt and the action sequences, was to try to make it feel as real and as authentic as possible. And Andy was pivotal in that. That's what they do.
3, 2, 1, action!
And cut. Good. That's pretty good.
Very good.
Our second day we shot at Larson Marine in San Pedro, and it's a family-owned marine repair shop. They work on all kinds of boats, from large to small. Marc wanted a place where Peter could sort of be learning to do his web slinging.
He grabs the next one.
We spent 5 days prepping it. The art department had a couple of days. The stunt guys had about 4 or 5 days. We built a big truss and all kinds of rigging in there, and it really worked great for that sequence.
It's Spider-Man realizing he's got these skills and developing these skills. We shot down in the San Pedro Marina. There's a big sequence down there where we have him actually flying. That's where he does his first real flying.
Ilram's on several lines. He is doing about 25 miles an hour, so if he hits anybody or anything, it's obviously going to hurt. So if you're in any doubt or you've got any equipment around that I may not have seen or don't know about, now's the time to speak up about it. Here we go, ready, and 3, 2, 1, action!
Vic and Andy Armstrong's stunt team are the best that I can imagine has to be out there. It's been a wonderful thing to get to know all those guys and to work with them and for them to invite me and allow me into the fold and to allow me to do as much physical stuff as the insurance allows. Which is quite a bit, actually. It's quite a fair bit that they've let me do.
And there's something really cool when you see the real guy doing something. And we've done that quite a bit with Andrew. Andrew's done some pretty gnarly bits of action, and it's very cool to have an actor that wants to do that.
3, 2, 1, action! Reach for it.
The high school is sort of a character in the film. It was decided by the filmmakers that we shoot the high schools here in Los Angeles. So we scouted literally all of the schools within LAUSD, and we branched out to many other cities. For some of the exterior work, we filmed at Taft High School off of Winnetka Boulevard. It's a great period 50s, 60s building. It looked an awful lot like Bronx High School, where we wanted to film initially in New York, but we just realized that with all the destruction that we'd never be able to film the interior there. So the little bit of high school work, we thought, let's get that in LA.
Put him down, Flag!
There is a phenomena here everywhere, all over the world, of bullying. And it can be verbally or physically. And for Peter to take the position that that's not acceptable and try and deal with it, that's again a nice journey, something different. It's not just stopping a burglar. So we are touching on that and start building his character.
So we went to Taft to shoot the courtyard and a couple other pieces of work where Gwen gets thrown out the window.
I'm gonna throw you out the window now.
The architecture is fantastic, and so I think once we remove a couple of palm trees from the background, nobody will ever know that we're not in the Bronx or Queens. We found a fantastic gymnasium at St. John Bosco High School in Bellflower. It's a 1960s construction building, has great lighting for our DP, and the school was fantastic to work with.
Ready, action.
We went there for 2 days and filmed the basketball court.
What's the matter with you, Parker?
You know, there's some stuff we shot on location in LA, which you never know if it's New York or LA. I mean, the downtown Los Angeles is a very good cover for some parts of New York.
Action, action.
We do this sequence in Upper Grand, which is doubling for New York, where Spider-Man is chased by the cops and he utilizes a big semi-truck and jumps over and Spider-Web swings underneath the viaduct that he's on and swings down into New York. So we'll integrate the two parts of the world into one there.
We ended up shooting in New York near the end of the schedule and incorporating it throughout the film. But again, we were trying to create a realistic world. We were trying to shoot on location as much as possible. But also, because of the amount of control we needed for some of the bigger action stuff, we redressed the entire backlot at Universal to orchestrate a living, breathing New York.
Universal has built an extensive New York street that has been there for a long time, but it burnt down, I think, approximately 3 years ago, and they rebuilt it. And they were just finishing it up, so it was available for us. So to have that and have Mike Riva, who's our production designer, and Leslie, our decorator, go in there and create this world of New York City for us, but it's totally controllable. We can do stunts, we can drive into a building, we can have an explosion, we can do whatever we want to do for the movie. So that was an element that we felt was very important for our film, no matter what.
We designed and constructed basically an entire facelift on everything that was at Universal, and then created basically 4 blocks of New York, and filled it with taxi cabs, which is probably the biggest secret, that you throw a cab in anywhere and it looks like New York.
Shop fronts and streetlights and fire hydrants, all of those things change rapidly in any city. So you look through all of the research you can find to make sure you're doing the right thing that looks like it's really on that city street.
Riva spent a lot of time with the smallest details, down to putting gum on the slidewalks to make it feel more like the city that we all love.
We spent a lot of money over at Universal and revamped the whole street, so we wanted to shoot every inch of it that we could, and the main unit went in there for a few days and shot the 3 crossroads there from every which way, and they changed the designs and everything else. So a lot of stuff goes on in there.
We were there for 2 weeks at night. It starts off with the lizard coming up through the subway, and he has a confrontation with the SWAT team, and we put like I think there was 900 bullet hits in the tile wall. We had to specially make the tile to match the subway tiles in New York.
We came up with this idea, let's just put some debris inside of a container and blow it up. Now you've got debris in here, because that's really what you do. You want to create just chaos. And then we hang them from the ceilings. That's what the burger bomb is. And the name, the burger bomb, comes from the container.
Oftentimes, we use a paintball gun that shoots zirconium balls. It's the same size as a paintball, 68 caliber, and it's got zirconium and sand in it. When it hits the wall, it just makes a really nice spark.
One of the first big action sequences that we shot outside, which is where Captain Stacy comes down out of the helicopter with the SWAT team, and we capture him momentarily, and we have him on the ground. And then you've got, people all around you. You've got, 4 or 5 city blocks worth of traffic and extras and all that stuff. And really, it comes down to that, that little beat with Spider-Man on the ground, which is, if it works, that's really what it's all about.
Action.
There's a sequence on the bridge where the lizard is coming after Dr. Rotha, and we had set up a bunch of cars on rigs that would shoot off and hurl them into the Hudson River below.
We couldn't do anything on the bridge in New York. It's just was out of the question, just logistics-wise. So the construction department literally built 300 feet of the Williamsburg Bridge on the back lot at Universal. And they really wanted to show the strength of this lizard. And so instead of just taking a car and launching it off the side, we had to jump over cars.
What they are is they're like gigantic pneumatic mouse traps. And we charge them with nitrogen, which is down there. It's about 2,000 PSI. This first one has 2 of them on it. And they'll go up like 10 feet in the air. It's going to be outrageous.
It's very safe and very well built by great special effects guys, but obviously they're big heavy pieces of steel and there's bits flying, so you can't be safe enough.
Here we go, and roll cameras. Ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It all worked, but that's the business we live in. We wreck things and have fun doing it.
Cut camera, cut camera.
Somebody help! Help me, my kid is trapped! Please, anybody!
We're on the bridge, the cars just went crashing over the side. My car's dangling by a web, like it does. And he's gonna come climbing up out of this flaming vehicle with my kid.
I'm gonna be scared, and Spider-Man's gonna have me in his arms. And Tom here is gonna be my fake dad.
You sounded disappointed. Like Tom here. Like who did you want? You want like Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise? You got Tom Howell, man.
Ready, and action.
Oh, God. Thank God you're okay.
One of the fun things about that sequence is there's a real emotional core to it. It's Peter Parker learning what it is to be Spider-Man. It's not just about vengeance. He realizes his powers can be used for something greater than his own satisfaction.
Spider-Man.
And cut, good.
To be honest with you, personally, I think the best filmmakers in the world are in Los Angeles still. The best crews ever, the best equipment, the best support. So if I can't be in the city where it's based in, I'd love to keep it here.
The bridge sequence was, I think, the most expansive sequence in terms of how many locations and how many little bits and pieces that we had to shoot. We shot on the Universal backlot, then we went to Sony and did a lot of our stage work at Sony.
Ready, and 3, 2, 1, action!
A part of bridge sequence we shot outdoors, and then the rest of the bridge sequence we were supposed to shoot indoors, and that's what we were shooting inside the studio.
What?
Hey!
What? And cut.
We had a hole in the roof, which we cut to make it look like it was torn metal, and we punched the fake fist through to threaten the actor inside. He did really good. He made it look really scary.
Action!
And then they hung the limousine by 4 wires with cantilevering poles and put the actor and camera inside the vehicle and bounced it around like the lizard was shaking him up and tossing him around.
Action!
You okay? And we cut.
I quite enjoyed it, you know, being in the car and car being tossed around everywhere. You know, it's like a roller coaster, you know. So I enjoyed it.
Action!
Oh my God!
It's all right.
Get away from me!
It's
Dad!
okay.
Dad!
Oh, look, see, look. Just a normal guy.
I think the scene where Spider-Man rescues a trapped kid in a car is a very, very cool scene, and something that's nearly all Andrew. And we did a lot of that, although on stage, really with a vertical car and Spider-Man being pulled through a small back window and the kid being pulled out on a web.
Jack, climb now! Yes, you can! The mask, put it on. It's gonna make you strong. Jack, do me a favor, a little faster, okay, bud?
3, 2, 1, drop!
That's great. Okay,
No,
good.
I mean, it's all good.
Perfect.
All
Good.
right.
Moving on.
The Onion's a sort of network of sewer pipes that we built into a sort of underground lair that Spider-Man drops into and then makes webs. And then waits and hangs out on those webs waiting for the lizard.
In the script, it's called The Sewer, and I didn't want to do a sewer with brick and gunk and all that stuff. I wanted to do these giant water pipes I had seen, which are part of the water and power district in New York, and they are huge.
It was a very tiring set to work on because Spider-Man spends his entire time up on webs, and we did it physically. We did it with modern high-tech lime.
Action!
He was supported at times with a cable, but all his weight was basically like walking around on a fishing net. And maintaining this interesting spider pose and spider movement and fast turning action like an aggressive spider would. And he did, I think, a great job. I think it'll become quite a signature move within the picture.
Our big thing there is making water move. We're in an intersection where all the water's coming in. What we have to be careful is there's just little things that you would never think about. The splash, we can't have a lot of splash. If the water's too warm, now you're going to create a lot of humidity and it's going to fog up the cameras. So in this movie, now the actors they're really forced to work in cold water because of this sewer. It just creates a big sauna in there. The water, even though it looks dirty, it's probably cleaner than the LA City water.
Water is a great production value element, and it's relatively inexpensive to do, but you get so much bang for your buck with it, so it was good.
There was a very large section of the high school built on stage. We staged a big battle between Peter Parker and the Lizard in there, so the whole stunt team would have to come in and basically throw Peter Parker through walls and things like that. It was a very realistic set because it reminded everybody of just being back in high school, and and we shot there for a long time.
Marc. And action. Lizard!
We don't have a giant lizard for me to fight with, so they're going to make it in CGI. So I have to fight with a tennis ball and a stick for some of the stuff, which is really hard. And then you got John, Big John Duff, who's the stuntman who's playing the lizard in lizard form, who is a scary looking dude because he's just so big, but again, such a nice person.
Action!
Yeah, you got it. You got your back.
So that helps when John's there and we can actually have a bit of rough and tumble together.
Action! Wow. You are nice. Now we got
There's some stuff that was done in the high school that was incredibly dangerous and scary because you're dealing with explosives and humans, but they did it without a hitch.
Action! Whoa.
The sets that we built were based on actual locations. It was about creating spaces that felt real and somewhat recognizable and part of a language that we understood. Of course, the exception of that is Oscorp. To me, Oscorp is the Tower of Babel, meaning it is a testament to man's vanity. And we like the idea that it was the tallest building in New York in our universe, and it's this big obsidian spire that shoots up into the sky with a sort of spiraling curve to indicate that Tower of Babel thing.
And you walk in, and then suddenly you're in Oscorp, this big, white, sterile place, which ironically interests him because he's a great student of science, thanks to his father. And so rather than intimidate him and terrify him, it excites him.
Welcome. My name is Dr. Curtis Connors. Yes, in case you're wondering, I'm a southpaw. I'm not a cripple. I'm a scientist.
We took over the entire stage, one of the big stages here, and we just created this glass and gray environment.
And action!
We used it very effectively and economically, and we saw every inch of it.
Everything is state-of-the-art, clean and sleek, and glass everywhere. As a matter of fact, I ran into one of the glass walls because I couldn't see it yesterday, which several members of the crew have done, so watch out if you go in there. We've approached many, many scientific companies and asked them to help us both with their technical expertise and their equipment. So their items get seen in a great-looking movie, and we get the benefit of those items for the short time that we're filming.
At the beginning, we went to a couple real labs. We went down to La Jolla and we did a lot of research and checked into what labs where they really do that kind of research look like, so we could have that sort of grounding in reality. The only two things that we really built, we built the mixing machine where Connors makes the serum to turn himself into the lizard that Gwen then eventually uses to create the antidote, and the Ganali device. Those still, I think, look very integrated into the overall design of Oscorp.
The biggest challenge in this movie was the spider room. That proved to be a huge challenge. You have to create a world that's believable. You don't want to lose the audience. So I had to figure out what's going on in the spider room. How does this work? What is it? It was described originally as some big place where they collect the webs and they push them, they put them in little capsules. We came up with a revolving room with spider webs and the machine room, just lots of contrasting colors, and tried to make it a scary environment because when Peter walks in there, he has no idea what he's walking into. And of course, that's where he gets basically bitten and turned into Spider-Man. It had to be very magical and different, so it had to be almost like walking into Merlin's, lab somewhere and being transformed. So it had to be very scary and interesting. We then had to build the top of it, the rooftop, we had to build for the end of the movie. And that was a bit of a challenge because it's a big, big rooftop. So we took over another big stage here, I think the biggest one actually, and built the rooftop. We had to research a lot of high-rise rooftops and recreate our version of it, 12 feet off the floor and surrounded by blue screen. So the fight will take place, and out there will be the basic skyline of New York.
3, 2, 1, action! Go! Action! And fighting, fighting, fighting. And right! And left! And let him down.
Fantastic.
Good. Right, Andrew? Good job.
I'm excited about the kind of big battle at the end, I'm excited to see that because, it sounds just so magnificent on the page.
And take him up.
And that's when the whole special effects and CGI department and stunt guys, that's when they will really start flying their flags, and so I'm really excited to see what they do with that.
Poor Peter Parker. No mother, no father, no uncle. All alone.
He's not alone.
It was an ambitious day, and part of what we're doing is we were compressing the time filmmaking. We're sort of skipping over the part where Dennis reloads, where we cut to the lizard, so I would have a second shotgun loaded and ready to go. So Dennis would fire his 6 shots.
What's up, Doc?
New gun. New gun.
We'd pause for a second, and I would hand in an already loaded shotgun that Captain Stacy's reloaded while the camera's looking somewhere else. Clear. We didn't get through a lot of blank ammunition those days.
Bring it on.
Lizard!
I don't think I want to die in this franchise here. I think I want to hang around. Unfortunately, I'm also a greedy, selfish actor, so the idea of doing a great death scene, of course, appeals to your ego as an actor because you don't get those very often. So it's a double-edged sword. I've got to find a way to talk them into having my character come back. Where, like, he's dating my daughter in the next, 3 movies, and I just keep appearing to him, talking head. I think we can do it, A 3D talking head. I think it's I've been talking to Marc about it. He's fairly resistant, but I think I can find a way around it, I plead with the audience, if you liked my character, to please write to the producers and say, bring back Captain Stacy. You never know.
New York has always been a character in Spider-Man in the comic books and in the movies. We have always shot the bulk of the movies on sound stages in LA. I think we've successfully made it feel like New York. We're doing the same thing now. Well, that's the magic of the movies.
Go. Good. Cut. Cut.
New York is incredibly difficult to shoot in, so we wanted to exploit the time we had in New York and spread it throughout the movie. You have to be careful about where you place those New York moments throughout the film so that people still feel a sense and a vibe of New York.
I'm swinging here! All Marvel comics are set in actual cities, and so no matter how outrageous the events are that are occurring in said city, it's still New York City. And so it's the ultimate city for Spider-Man to be set in, obviously. He's a Queens boy.
Oh, God. Somebody go to IKEA.
Tyler, you ready for Andrew to go up there?
And action.
We get to shoot this story that is a quintessentially New York character created by and for New York.
Be Marc. Here we go. Ready and action.
I think we've all been a bit excited to get out there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really wonderful to feel like we're in the place where this story was born and where this character was born. I think it's important for us to feel that while we're making this film. So I think it's going to be really challenging, but really, really inspiring.
Cut, resetting.
New York is a character in all the Spider-Man films. In this film, Peter is living a certain kind of lifestyle, and when his parents drop him off at his aunt and uncle's house for a couple of days, his life changes, and his relationship with the city changes. He goes from Upper West Side to working class Queens, ostensibly.
Be Marc.
Hey. We're going to be on Fuller Place for our Ben and Mays exteriors. We have 2 nights of work there, many drive-ups, drive-aways, conversations on the porch. We're going to make some rain, but it's got a great look. We know that we can get 3 or 4 doors down from our hero and look through the porches at the dialogue on the porch.
2 of my teachers showed up, and Flash showed up. Everyone but you.
It's nice to work in a neighborhood like that. It's a very homey, family-friendly neighborhood. Going to be doing a lot of plate work on the Williamsburg Bridge for the sequence where the lizard finally makes his appearance, which will be very, very cool to do.
Most of his victims are suspects. Some of them are serious rap sheets. They're calling him a vigilante.
Okay, he's not a vigilante. He's an anarchist, okay?
We're going to film in Midtown.
Hey, Marc.
At our Oscorp.
Getting ready to do our first Steadicam shot in New York City.
Welcome to Oscorp. My name's Gwen Stacy. I'm a senior at Midtown Science, and I'm also head intern to Dr. Connors.
We're going to film a little bit on the Upper West Side for the exterior of Gwen Stacy's apartment. We're going to be in Queens for our subway work and the area where Uncle Ben meets his demise.
Be only marker.
So there's a huge part that New York plays in the shaping and the forming of Peter and who he is. And not being brought up by a research scientist, but basically being brought up by working class steel worker and his wife. And so we tried to use the locations to help convey how the change in his life is reflected in the changes in locations that we shoot.
It's 207.
No.
Yeah, you're holding up the line.
All right, just give me a second, man.
Under Riverside Drive, you don't get locations like that anywhere else other than New York.
We have this great location in New York, which is underneath the elevated subway.
So we'll have you start here, Doug. First of all, we're going to build this traveling winch rig where we're going to do 180 feet of it under an architecturally fabulous elevated roadway in New York, and we're going to travel him along on that with cars and vehicles dodging him, and should all be stunt drivers underneath him. The shot really is about, here's a car, whoosh, here's a man, here's a car. If you're worried it looks like he's going to hit you, romp on it.
I want to see if I get this girder architecture.
I'm dressed as a bum, but I am flying Spider-Man. I'm running the travel on him. The swings or pendulums back and forth, and I'm running the trolley that goes down the street.
Okay, we're good. Here we go, guys.
Here we go. Ready, guys?
Ready, ready, ready. Ready, this is picture. All in gear, all ready to go. Here we go, and 3, 2, 1, action!
Under Riverside Drive in Harlem, Spider-Man is going to be swinging, not unlike a trapeze artist, over cars and buses for real. This is not a CGI creation. This is, we are going there and this is what we are really doing. And every time we can really do this with a person, we have done it in this movie.
And stopping there. All right, very good. In between those swings, we've built a vehicle which literally is like a giant puppeteer rig, which is 30 feet high, and so we can travel him along at any speed we want and then puppeteer him around, still by his hands, but he can do these giant swings, and we can obviously bring him in super close to cars or over the top of cars or, you know, over vans and things. Once he's swinging, he's as skilled as he might be, still 80% passenger.
I'm gonna run on that truck while swinging. It's gonna be fun.
Here we go, guys. Ready? In gear, lights on, flashes off. So he's flying down the road on the end of a cable. He's got to be trusting that if something is coming his way, that he's not going to be able to get out of the way, that the guy watching on the end of the button is going to press the button and suck him out of the way.
We've got one bus scene where Spider-Man is swinging down. This is when he's early on, just learning to swing and fly, and he hits head on into a bus and rolls down the side of the bus.
3, 2, 1, action!
I start right like this. We hit the trip, he falls down, he hits the button to activate the trolley. I turn him around with my legs, and as the trolley goes down, I'm spinning him.
The bus itself be moving, 15, 20 miles an hour, and we're dropping him from above the windshield. That's a kind of a complex, dangerous thing, and that'll be good when that's done too, but that's a great gag.
Back number 1, very good.
I just want to let you know. Thanks. You're nice.
Alright, going again, guys. Stand by, guys. Here we go. That's shit.
Hey, Marc.
Action!
Sometimes you just got to do stuff, you can find yourself umming and ahhing too much and making it a bit too soft. At the end of the day, it can be a stunt, you just got to do it.
You lost an eyeball. Nice one.
I'm stuffing all my emotions deep down inside. I'm going to do that again and again until 4:30 this morning, where I'm sure all the emotions will flow out. But it's been a good run. It's been intense at times, but I'm excited to be done. Proud of what we accomplished. Very impressed by the team that's been assembled. And then, yeah, very excited.
Family Marc. A Marc.
B Marc. Action.
There are a lot of things in this process that stay the same.
even with all the technology and things like that, there's a lot of it where you're still going and you're looking at images, and you have to make choices in how these scenes come together. While you're filming, you don't do too deep a cut because you really want to work with the director on it. You're trying to assemble all the scenes together to make sure that you have all the material you need. And they're trying to cut every day to do some type of a rough assemblage.
The process was hard, It's different than 500 Days of Summer in a lot of ways in terms of the scrutiny and the obligations you have to the source material and the studio and the logistics of it. But then at the same time, it's a movie. It's about a character who's changing, a character who's different at the beginning of the movie than he is at the end of the movie. And as long as you keep that in mind, then the rest of it is just homework.
That's not your job.
Maybe it is.
Marc's intent, I don't think, is that much different than any other directors, obviously, to get great performances and make sure the story tracks. The thing that he's really good at is in making sure that there's really strong connectivity between the characters in the footage, which makes my job super easy because, when your actors are connecting via the lines and shot placement and how they're reacting to one another, all you have to do is find the right take and cut them together, and it's magic. And I was really impressed with his action, with his ability to get fun, entertaining, on the edge of your seat drama within the action sequences, which we didn't really have any of that in 500 Days, so I hadn't really seen any of that before. Rhys! And we had a huge amount of footage. It seems odd to me that on a movie like 500 Days of Summer, where you maybe shoot the equivalent of 250,000 feet of film, the director gets 10 weeks to do his cut. Then on a movie like Spider-Man, where you have 2 units rolling the whole time with 2 to 3 cameras and you're shooting the equivalent of maybe 2 million feet of film, you still only get 10 weeks to do your first cut. So, when you have these enormous action scenes, as well as these really important dramatic scenes, it's nice to have a helping hand.
Marc would sit predominantly with Alan. They'd bring me in, talk about something they wanted me to work on, a sequence, a scene, and then I'd go away and try a bunch of stuff and then show it to Marc. And then Marc would work with me for a while, and then it would end up back in Alan's room, and so that's kind of how it worked out.
There's nothing like having a fresh pair of eyes that's non-threatening, somebody that you really trust, who kind of takes your baby and changes it around, and then you get a look at it and go, wow, why didn't I think of that? You get a whole different perspective, and I like to think I did the same thing for Mike as he did for me. I mean, that I found to be really valuable. The hard choices were, okay, so what are we gonna cut out? Because the movie can't be 4 hours long. So, I mean, the amount of footage that we have, what is the right amount of that? Because it was so good and so powerful, and there was so much of it.
I'm beautiful, aren't I?
At the end, it becomes a bit of a balancing act, but now when you talk about it, it sounds like, oh, there's a scientific way to achieve that, but in reality, there isn't. You just kind of start at the beginning, and you plod your way through, and you do the best you can, you watch it, and then you react to that, and then you watch it again, and you make changes accordingly.
You can work on a sequence over and over again, but then you have to watch the movie as a whole and say, okay, this part is sagging, or I get this piece of information, I don't need it anymore. And even after you've done that and watched it a bunch of times, you don't really know until you sit in front of an audience, and then you can really get a sense as to where it's playing or not playing. So it's it's what we do as editors, is trying to find the quickest way from A to B and still be entertaining.
Okay, hold it there.
Marc has a real sense of how he wants things to play in terms of timing and how scenes, transition from one another and juxtapose. So the director's always sort of that common, constantly making sure everything fits properly in terms of thematically and pacing. And obviously the editors are responsible for a lot of that, but the director is the one who sort of paints a brush across it all, makes sure it fits right.
In terms of the time, it's such a different scale that you lose sight of the shore for a longer period of time. So that can be daunting, but again, at the end of the day, you just keep the character in mind. What's Peter doing? Where's Peter at? And that's all you really can do. I mean, just trying to find the truth in the moment and stay loyal to that.
Yeah.
I don't really know. The last minute.
Marc had a really specific vision for the reality of the world that Spider-Man lived in. And he thought it'd be really, really cool to just have Spider-Man react with present-day New York rather than a stylized version.
This one? Great.
But that makes the visual effects work a lot more challenging because then you have to push this level of reality. It has to integrate very cleanly with the rest of the way that the movie looks.
One of the most pervasive effects throughout the movie is Connor's missing arm, and we messed around with the idea of, you know, hiding his arm in his suit, and it just looked blocky and ridiculous. And so it came down to the point where we had to remove it and paint it out.
And they're challenging on a technical level, making sure that when the arm is removed, that what's remaining of the real sleeve is going to move properly against the remnant of the arm, but it actually has a huge impact on your impression of the character and the fact that, you know, why he wants to pursue creating the serum and continue taking the serum even though he knows that he's selling his soul to it.
There was a lot of people involved painting out that arm tirelessly day in and day out. It was one of the first things that we started on, one of the last things we finished.
Down in the sewers was our big place to showcase the webs. When he creates this sort of trap for the lizard, the basis for it was some cabling that was set up from the stunt crews that the actors could climb across, and that gave us the movement on the webs that we had to match when we were using the photography of the actors. ImageWorks removed the practical cables and replaced them with digital web lines. To convey the director's story point that Spider-Man uses genetically engineered webs, ImageWorks artists referenced polymer and silicone to root the design in the physical world. The strength of the web line comes from its continuous solid core, and then more fine, barbed details give it visual interest. The tunnels and water were extended digitally beyond the confines of the stage to further enhance the sense of depth and dimensionality on set. Enhanced by digital water effects from Scanline Inc., ImageWorks also created a completely digital version of the set. When the lizard finally arrives, the entire scene is fully digital. Digital environments were also required in the part of the scene where our characters plunge into the murky depths of the sewer tunnels. Layers of digital muck were added to the environment to create the right sense of murkiness. The sewer tunnel environment is built to scale at 400 feet long. To add authenticity, garbage from the streets was modeled and textured, then simulated to help indicate the strong current that our hero was fighting against. Algae and weeds softened the environment and kept a sense of movement along the edges and corners. Each time a character hit the sides, silt is disturbed and whisked into the currents.
I actually really enjoy that sequence because it uses 3D in a way that's a little bit more counterintuitive. It's about sort of this constricting space. And the other thing is, you've never seen Spider-Man underwater. This is the first time you see him battling underwater, and there's that added sense of urgency because you can't breathe. And of course, the lizard is much more comfortable in the sewer water than is Spider-Man. It's really fun to imagine ways for a spider and a lizard to interact. You know, part of the fun of creating those action sequences is what's the physical dimensionality to these two creatures fighting? How would they fight?
The fight sequence in the high school hallway is a great example of an all-CG sequence. Everything in this scene was created digitally, including the characters and the environment, and as a result, gives us lots of opportunities to do things that we normally couldn't do if we were working with pre-existing photography. The process begins by producing a digital version of the set that matches the photography in other sequences. With the digital set in place, the director works with the layout department to design the fight choreography with simple representations of the character models. This layout becomes the starting template for editorial, and from there, the animation team begins the process of executing believable performances with real weight and physics. Not only are we dealing with the gross weight and physics, but fine details on a smaller scale as well. Notice the flexing muscles and the tendons under the skin. These volumes are manipulated by animators, then the skin is draped over that anatomy and treated as a simulated cloth material so that you can literally see the muscles flexing and sliding underneath. The effects team studied lots of reptile references in order to duplicate the material properties of real lizard skin. It had to be loose and leathery, with enough resolution to wrinkle and fold in natural ways as the creature moves. Simulations are applied to the internal anatomy as well as the skin so that the volumes respond to external forces as well. Notice how the volumes jiggle and resonate at impact, and the collisions need to affect the environment also. A lot of destruction that you see, like damage to these lockers, were modeled in anime for a specific look, along with the damage to the walls, door jambs, and other props. Because the sequence is completely digital, entirely new shots and camera work could be made even at this late stage in production. As an example, the director can take a shot like this chase across the ceiling, and with animation already complete, is able to design more compelling camera work for a series of shots that supports the action in a much more interesting and dynamic way. Especially when coupled with effects details like dust, debris, sparks, and atmospheric depth cueing. The final result puts audiences front and center in a dynamic balance between nuanced character animation and dramatic composition of light, color, modeling, and effects.
The crane sequence was one of those things. I remember I was driving down Sepulveda Boulevard, and I was thinking about, if I were Spider-Man, how would I fly through the streets? And I was like, it isn't as easy as you think it would be. Like, you need to find certain pick points in order to create a forward momentum or forward velocity. And I looked up and there was a crane, and I was like, well, that's how he would do it. He would use those cranes. And I like the idea of all these cranes coming over the street and creating a pathway for Spider-Man, and the idea of him seeing these people helping him out for once. And it's something that inspires him to push a little bit harder and go a little bit further.
The movement of Spider-Man swinging is really inspired by what the stuntmen did in earlier parts of the movie, and we have a couple of blue screen shots of stuntmen landing on this pallet of drywall, but the majority of the other shots, because of the scope and how much geography we're trying to cover, was done in CG. But the inspiration really came from the movements that Andy Armstrong really developed.
In addition to all the challenge of making everything grounded, we really had to bring out that Spider-Man element that everybody's so familiar with, and that was Marc's go-to in so many cases. It's going back to the comic book artwork and trying to extract those poses, and the animators would be trying to find moments to hit a variety of different poses that are really familiar and iconic. When we talk about authenticity in the animation, we're generally referring to believable weight, physics, and gravity. Although he's a superhuman, we still want to believe that our hero is being affected by and interacting with real-world physics in a believable way. In other words, he doesn't have the power to change the effects of gravity, but he uses his strength and agility to interact with gravity in unique and interesting ways. The camera can be just as dynamic as the character as he swings through the streets of New York. The lens is often animated throughout the shot to achieve dramatically foreshortened compositions that have become one of the signatures of the Spider-Man artwork. The third part of the authenticity challenge was to construct a convincing New York City environment. All of the environments were constructed digitally from the ground up. All the buildings down the length of 6th Avenue were built to scale, including plazas and foliage and street lamps, food cart vendors and taxi stands, and all the subtle details that make 6th Avenue unique. In the end, the only thing that wasn't built as physical geometry is the matte painting of distant clouds.
I wanted that crane sequence to have some emotional resonance, and so there was this idea of physical freedom. He's not fully in control until the end of the sequence, where the theme hits right as he gets his stride. And then there's this moment of release, and then he goes back and he has to, get back into the fight for his city and for his life. I was really excited about creating a very specific, very simple theme that you could play with one hand on a keyboard. And James, we walked into his studio one day, and he came up and he's like, I got something for you. And there it was. Dun, 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 dun. And I got chills. I showed it to Matt and Avi, the producers, and we'd all sort of wanted that, and I'd wanted it from the very beginning. One of the first meetings I had was like, I want this simple, recognizable theme for when Spider-Man's coming to town, and James cracked it in about an hour and a half.
It's a big action hero movie, but I wanted to add colors that you would never associate with a movie like that and pull out emotions that aren't associated with a movie like this. It's already, you know, it doesn't even matter what the notes are, you already cast a certain mood and a spell with just hearing that. And just putting that kind of music in a film like this says reams about the approach of the filmmaker and the approach of the composer. Because it's not a heroic thing. It just works on you in a different way. Once again. The cue we started this morning is a very important cue because obviously it's the transformation of him from being civilian to becoming Spider-Man. And what I'm listening to in the headphones is vocal tracks, electronic tracks, and pre-laid them. And then the orchestra, we hear it in our headset, and the orchestra plays on top of that, overdubs that.
It was exciting to discover or rediscover a more traditional, classic, big orchestral sound. I wanted to find something that felt like a big movie.
I've used all kinds of interesting electronic colors and weird sort of ethnic instruments, and there's a lot of soloistic piano music that I played. That's another reason why we wear headsets, to try and sort of follow my crazy piano performances.
He managed to create a sense of the environment within the score. And I think about New York as a jungle. What are the sounds that emerge from it? The score has to create a feeling that helps you understand what's going on inside the character's head.
There are these huge bombastic scenes with this big 120-piece orchestra. And then there are these intimate scenes where I score it with just a voice, a boy soprano and a piano, or just piano solo.
I wanted to protect the simplicity of the love story. I wanted it to feel delicate and a little bit fragile, despite all the massive spectacle and the marauding intensity of some of the action stuff. It was really important to create a feeling of smallness in the midst of this, to keep it feeling like there was this little kid. I think what James was able to do was really unify the film and create that last polish that felt both emotional and exciting, that I thought was really fantastic.
The action stuff will take care of itself. It's going to look great and it's going to sound great. The part that is really important are the in-between bits. What Peter's thinking, when he gets pensive, when he loses a family member, when he is developing this relationship with Gwen. It's really important to bring out the understory, the human story, for me. And that's just the way I like to write scores.
With the music. Stand down now, or we will.
In an action movie, sound is an incredibly important component of it, and we kept on pushing up the dBs as we go into the movie, so you get that sense of scope and spectacle and danger and bang and boom and the fireworks that come from that. But then again, there's also moments of quiet, Like on the bridge, you know, we took out a lot of the sound effects. When he climbs into the van for the first time, there's no music, there's very few sound effects because we wanted to create a sense of stillness, which is really fun to play with in a film where people expect it to be, you know, wall-to-wall action. We went through many different web shooter sounds, and one of the fun things about the web shooters that like was creating the you know, there's the visual part of it. You feel a little bit of smoke or a little bit of mist that comes out when the shooters go out, but there's also there's an electronic component to it, and then there's just the velocity of it.
Oh, it's so simple.
We wanted that thing to feel like a real projectile that creates a sense of power, and I think you feel that like in the car thief scene. You feel like these things are being unleashed, and they feel a little bit dangerous.
Help!
Which I think was a really important part of that they are not just something that he can swing with, but they're weapons. They use a variety of different sounds. They stack them together to create one sound. You know, you have the warm up, like like when you're turning on a computer, and then you have a small explosive sound. They all overlap and play at one time to create a single.
With great power comes great responsibility.
That's great, Andrew, really good.
It's hard to separate the movie from the experience of making the movie. And it's my second movie, and so it's not, you know, this is all new to me. Somewhere we are going to put it in. I love the process. I love the product. One of the big reasons I make movies is to collaborate with people who I think are interesting and creative people, and that's something that I'll always take with me are those wonderful relationships that I got to develop while making it.
The second take, I think, was the best.
Circle take 2.
It was a really great adventure, and I got to know and love each one of these people in their own ways, and really wonderful people, and all committed to making a new and unique kind of movie, and that was an adventure in and of itself.
Spider-Man's popularity and the other characters of Marvel is due to the people who came after me, the people who kept it good and maybe made it better.
Action!
And the movies have helped to maintain and keep the popularity of Spider-Man and the other characters, I think, more than any other single thing.
I think that Spider-Man is universal to begin with, just in its thematics and its story. He's not like a rich guy or like a guy from another planet, but he's you or me or anybody in the audience. The things that make you want to see a Spider-Man movie, that it's a real boy with real problems with whom we can relate, that there's action, that there's romance, that there's humor, that there's drama. Those are the underpinnings of any Spider-Man endeavor.
It's about what it means to grow up and to face responsibility and to feel all of these changes and this power within yourself and to know what to do with it. It's just very simple and very powerful, and the stuff of great drama over and over again.
I've been all over the world with Spidey, and he is so well loved. Parents like him, the kids like him. His physical abilities are like one of the greatest athletes ever lived. So it's all good. Why did it endure all this time? That's the word phenomena. No one will ever know.
You're not gonna get in the way of my plan, Peter Parker!
I pinch myself every day going, shit, man, I'm in a Spider-Man film. This is like, you never, ever, ever have dreamt it. The honor of being in it and the amazement of being in it. But that coupled with doing intelligent and incisive explorations into the human condition, to have both in one package is just joyous.
When a movie's based on a book or on a comic or on a cartoon, it seems that the audience kind of has a prior knowledge of the characters and are therefore kind of rooting for them, and the fans of movies in this kind of capacity are so exciting. They're like my favorite kind of people in the world, and there's a real sense of community in the audience and a real sense of passion.
The one thing I feel like I've learned is when you're making a movie like this, you absolutely have to listen to the fans as much as humanly possible, and then you have to go away and make the film you want to make.
Did you tell the boy the truth about his father?
There's parts of the story that I think were obviously designed to go into a second movie, but I try not to think about that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the audience is going to decide if they want another one or not. You know, and I'll cross that bridge when it comes.
I want to see him a bit happier next time. He hasn't been that happy during this story. Like, he's had moments of joy, but he discovers very quickly that the life of Spider-Man is not all it's cracked up to be. It's actually pretty tough. You know, obviously he's got to go through some struggle, but I'd really like to see him in pure joy for a while.
You can't still go through your legs. It goes down sideways, George.
Why don't you tell us about your day?
It's another reason I need to be in the next, like, 5 Spider-Man movies, because otherwise my kids are not going to think I'm cool for a long time again. Dear Spider-Man producers, bring Captain Stacy / Dennis Leary back. I'm not telling you what to write, I'm just suggesting. Dennis with one N.
You know, you think about Peter Parker, you think about Spider-Man, you think about the mythology, you think about that character you saw growing up, and it's hard not to feel emotional and nostalgic and protective and exhilarated and scared and nervous and all these other things. But I don't know if you can ever adequately evaluate your own work. It's too close to you. It's loaded and filled with a lot of bad days and good days, and it's 2 years that it took to make this, and people have been born and people have died and people have gotten divorced and people have gotten married, and it's a chapter in your life. It's not just a movie.
Oh wait, I'm sorry.
And cut. Let's go one more time.